Hey everybody, it's me. I hope you all had a great weekend. Boy, that was some really nice weather we had over the weekend, wasn't it? I don't think I'd seen weather like that in a really long time. It probably won't last very long, but let's try to enjoy it while we can, okay? All right. So today, I got a quick one for you today. 3 vocabularies. Plausible, feasible, viable. Let me just say one thing right off the bat. These are not essential vocabularies. They're not essential, meaning that you can go on and spend your time studying other things and learning other things, and your English will improve, and you can speak and use English at a decent level without ever using these 3 vocabularies. They're not essential. However, I do want to go over them with you today for a couple of reasons. The first one is rather obvious. The first one is that these vocabularies actually are useful. When you need them and you know how to use them, they become actually very useful. So that's the first and obvious reason. The second and not so obvious reason is if you are watching this right now, there's a really good chance that you are a Korean learning English. Okay, you are a Korean person learning English. And if that's true, there's something you should know. There are so many vocabularies that you are missing out on, because there are other vocabularies that you are already familiar with that seem to have similar meanings. Did you understand what I just said? Let me say that again. There are so many vocabularies that you are missing out on because there are other vocabularies that you're already familiar with that seem to have similar meanings. And when you hear it like this, you may think, so what's wrong with that? I mean, if there's already a vocabulary that I'm familiar with and it has similar meanings, then why can't I just keep using that? Why do I have to go and learn that harder one? That makes sense. However, as I said, that seem to have similar meanings. So let's start with the first one today, and that is feasible. When you say that something is feasible, it not only means it's possible, but it means it can be done in a realistic sense. It can be done in a practical sense. It can be done. But when you say that something is simply possible, you're only talking about the possibility. It's a much more fundamental context. So think of a case like this. Let's say that you already have a full-time job, but you suddenly need to make some more money. So, can you just go and get another full-time job that requires you to work all night? So that would mean you work all day, and maybe you get 4 or 5 hours of sleep, and you work all night. Possible, and some people actually do that. Possible, but is it feasible? That's another question. Sure, it's possible because, people actually do that. But is it feasible? Does it make sense to do that practically? Does it make practical sense? Does it make realistic sense to do that? Is it feasible? Okay? So I hope you can understand the difference there between possible and feasible. So you can also think of it like this. Anything that's feasible is possible. But just because something is possible doesn't necessarily mean that it's feasible. I hope you understand what that means. Okay, so that's what feasible is. Similar to possible, but possible in a realistic sense, in a practical sense. That's why the word feasible is often used with the word plan. So a feasible plan, we came up with a feasible plan, or you can say this plan is not feasible. We came up with a plan to do this, but at the end we decided it was not feasible. Okay, so that's the kind of context that the word feasible is used in. Now, this is where it gets a little confusing with the word viable, because viable has a very, very similar vibe. A word that is commonly used with viable is solution. Solution. And this is, I think, important to remember because native speakers almost never say feasible solution. Because why? Feasible means doable. A doable solution? No, a solution is not doable. But a solution can be viable, a viable solution. So why is that? Is it beneficial? Is it something that profits us in the long term? Okay? I think those are some of the key words that we should keep in mind when we think of viable. Is this viable? That means, will this benefit us? Will this profit us in the long term? Is this sustainable? At the same time, benefiting us and profiting us in the long term. That's what viable is. So when I think of the word viable, I often think back at my decision to switch to teaching online instead of offline. Why did I do that? Why did I make that switch? Why did I make that decision? If you've ever taught a classroom full of students, I'm sure you would agree that it's a very physically demanding job. It is. It's a very, very physically demanding job. And when I decided to make the switch, I was in my mid-30s and I wasn't getting any younger. And it meant that it would only get more difficult year after year moving forward. And so I decided it was not viable. Teaching in an actual classroom full of students, 13 hours a day, that was not viable. And what does that mean? I decided that that would not benefit me in the long run. It was not sustainable. Okay, that's what it means. That wasn't viable. I needed a more viable solution. And that was when I made the difficult decision to switch to teaching online. All right, so we just went over two words, feasible and viable. Again, feasible is very similar to doable, but you should keep in mind two key words, realistically and practically. Okay, something that can be done in a realistic sense. Whereas when we say that something is viable or something is not viable, we're looking at it in a more plus-minus perspective. Is it a plus to do this in the long term? Okay, so does it bring benefit? Does it give us profit by doing that? If it is, it's viable. If it's not, that's not viable. Now, there's one more word that I want to go over today really quickly. This one will be easy because it's very different from the rest, and that is plausible. The word that is most commonly used with plausible is plausible theory, and another one is a plausible explanation. It's very different, right? A viable solution, a feasible plan, a feasible strategy, a viable solution, a viable system. A plausible explanation, a plausible theory, a plausible story. Plausible means something that is more believable, something that can be trusted, can be believed. Okay? So, for instance, let's say that we're trying to we're trying to put together a story to make someone believe something. Okay, so basically we're lying and we're trying to come up with a story to lie to someone. Okay, and let's say that someone came up with a story and they told us the story and it doesn't seem very believable. Okay, and so in that situation we can say, no, we need to come up with a more plausible story. That story is not very plausible. As you can see, this is very different from feasible and viable. And so why did I group these together? Like, why is plausible next to these other two? Because for some reason, and I was kind of surprised to see this too, but when I checked online, a lot of people were confused with plausible, viable, and feasible. I'm not sure why. Maybe they just look similar, the words? I'm not really sure. But anyway, plausible is very different from feasible and viable. Okay, so a plausible story, something that can be more easily trusted. A plausible explanation, an explanation that makes more sense and so is more likely to be believed or trusted. A theory that is more, same thing, a more believable or can be trusted theory. So, for example, I don't know, like UFOs and aliens. Why have we not been visited? I mean, there are UFO sightings, but why have we never communicated with aliens? Well, one plausible theory, at least among the ones I've heard, is that they're simply not interested. Aliens are not interested in us because we're just simply too stupid. We're just nowhere near their level of intelligence and technology that they're not even interested in us. I mean, have you ever, walked across the street and saw some ants and try to communicate with it? No. So it's just like that. We're just too stupid for the aliens. That's one plausible theory. Plausible theory, a plausible story, a plausible explanation. All right, something very important that I have to mention before we finish. You can never just watch a lesson video and just fully learn that. You have to go through the process of trying it and getting it wrong and slowly getting the hang of it. That's how you learn a language, and almost any other thing in life for that matter. So don't get so caught up in trying to understand it 100%, because that can't happen. The only thing you can do is to understand it like halfway, and even if you don't understand it very well, just try it. Try using it. And make bad sentences. That's part of the learning process, okay? Make bad sentences, get feedback, and just improve little by little. Okay? All right. So that's all I wanted to show you today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you maybe later tonight, maybe tomorrow in a future live stream, or in the next lesson video.
When I get in, I take a shower, read a book and feel empowered. Smoking on that sour got me counting down the hours, thinking of all the shit that they could do but won't allow us. Then I realized they all some fucking cowards. The world is ours. Me and my brother twin like the towers, and we want it now, never later. No more favors done with all these traitors.